Thanks. All right, so a few years back, one of our officers in 2012 put in a grant submission. We have a group of businesses in Durham region that put together this committee called PADAN, which is Police Awards Dinner and Appreciation Night. I know I'm talking fast, I'm trying to leave room for them. And they put together this thing and they sponsor our awards night, but they also raise money and then officers can put in to get grants to do certain programs. One of our officers, Mary Ann Karpus, put in for this youth crime prevention grant, and that got approved for 3 years, and that started in 2013 when I came into the regional coordinator role. With that spot, basically what it is we offer up 5 $1,000 grants to high school students to come up with their own youth crime prevention pieces. So that's, it's in year 4 right now, and it's been extended for another 2 years after this year. Basically, I know that youth are far more influential on other youth than the rest of us adults. So it was one way for us to get to them to create their own pieces. Some of the things that came through were phenomenal, a lot of them with social media pieces and that. And what I asked for was one of our school board officials. Dan Hogan works with the Durham District School Board, Safe Schools, and Michelle is a teacher at one of our high schools with Durham District High School, and they put in 2 years in a row and got their grant submitted and approved and came up with some really good things. I wanted them to talk about what they did with their proposal, so I'm out.
Thanks, Chuck. Dan Hogan, I'm from the Durham District School Board, and one of the things I have to start out with, I was talking to Hallie in the elevator earlier, and I said I've come for 7 years, and then I'm thinking back, and I've been at COYO 5 years. This is the first time I've actually been on stage. It's a wonderful experience. Chuck said, do you want to use the mic? And I said, no, I want to be Madonna'd up, and I love the mic up here. It feels really cool. I usually don't get to speak like this. I'm going to walk you through a little bit of a story around the Youth Prevention Grant, and I'm going to start out with a little about COYO. We're from the teaching side of things. We work with the school board, and when you hear the word PD, you often think of professional development. But when we're talking about PD and COYO and the work you guys do, I think about it more as positive deviance. That's when you take a look at a problem and you come up with some extraordinary solutions to solve that. And I've seen that through the examples that were already given up here earlier this afternoon. And I'm hoping that when you hear our story, you'll think that we're also an example of positive deviance as well, looking at things a little differently. I'm going to walk you through a little bit of a story here. So DIDAC. Everybody works in different agencies, and different agencies have lots of different acronyms. So what is DIDAC? Well, it's Durham Youth Drug Awareness Committee. I'm actually the longest standing committee member on this particular committee, and I've been on it for 2 years. Chuck is actually the second longest standing committee member. He's on it for just under 2 years. I think he's a month less than I am. They approached me and I said, I think the Durham Regional Police should be on this committee because we really value our partnership with the Durham Regional Police at Durham District School Board. And what the committee actually does is it looks at creating awareness with youth around substance use issues, as well as encouraging youth to make positive decisions about the substances they use. And they also look at increasing youth awareness of the 8 local agencies. So within our committee, we have a number of agencies that are involved. We have the Caria Community Center. They were a prime lead group that ran DIDAC before. The Durham Region Health Department. And the Durham Region Health Department had 2 roles. First, they always supported DIDAC, but they stepped back for a number of years, and they took kind of a backseat view to it for a long time. The Durham Regional Police was not involved initially, and they came on, as well as Durham Catholic and Durham District School Board recently. And then we get additional funding through the town of Whitby and the town of Ajax over the course of the last 2 years. So what did DIDAC do? Before I came to DIDAC, before Chuck came to DIDAC, they ran a couple of events. They ran the Ultimate Mixed School Contest. Now, the Ultimate Mixed School Contest, what's that? Students get together in their cafeteria and they make mocktails. Now, as a substance abuse violence prevention coordinator, I had some issues with kids making mocktails and pretending to drink in their cafeteria because it kind of role modeled drinking. And in reality, we knew that after they made the mocktails, they said, these are really tasty. Wouldn't they be great with vodka? And so I knew that wasn't a good practice. The other thing that DIDAC did is they also sponsored the graduation event, Choose Your Ride. I do actually like the Choose Your Ride event. I think it's a smart event as part of something bigger. And that was the issue that we were experiencing. There was nothing bigger. It was just DIDAC and these two events, and they'd come and support these events happening at schools. Eventually, DIDAC is about 10 years old. Over the last few years, it got down to 2 schools regularly participating. This is a problem. We want all our schools in Durham region to participate in some kind of drug awareness program, and having the 2 same schools repeatedly ask, can we do the Choose Your Ride? Can we have the ultimate mix party at our school? It wasn't working. So we looked at revamping that. Now, this brings in the Durham Region Youth Crime Prevention Grant. Every year, Chuck approaches me and he says, Dan, we've had 3 schools apply. Can you start hounding some schools? It's past the due date. No one's applying for the grant.
It's free money.
And it's always the same 3 schools that apply for the grant. This is problematic. We want schools to access this money. We want youth to be involved. And at $1,000 per student group, that's a big chunk of change that students can do a lot with, and it wasn't being accessed well. And so we were giving, there were some great projects, but I know Chuck could also say that there were some projects that we really had to work with the schools to develop. They would throw something in the last minute, and we'd go out and try to support them developing something within their school to meet the needs and meet the criteria for the grant itself. Lastly, the Durham Region Health Department. The Durham Region Health Department attends all our schools in Durham. Elementary schools, the door is open. Principals want them there, teachers want them there. High schools, the doors are open too, but they didn't seem to make the same level of connection with the administrators, with the teachers, and with the youth. They weren't making a connection, and they identified that as a problem. So we've got 3 problems here. We've got DIDAC running old programs that aren't getting out to schools. We're having a hard time getting people doing grants. And we're also having difficulties with the public health nurses getting into the high schools and making an impact. DIDAC came up with the idea of a youth drug awareness conference, and we called it the Leader in Me Action to Awareness. So what the purpose of the conference was to bring student leaders and start to develop programs within schools to support the whole school through the student voice. So we had 7 community partners, 4 school boards, so it's not just the Durham District and Durham Catholic, we also have KPR and PVNC boards, and we invited 30 different schools. Based on the conference, students presented info to parents, students, teachers, and created activities, contests, and displays. The campaign utilized student voice to develop campaigns and deliver key messages. And these campaigns weren't all necessarily drug campaigns, but they were campaigns. We know healthy relationships reduce drug use, so we had campaigns about LGBTQ communities and supporting them within the schools, because we know that community is at risk to use drugs, so that we went with that. This year, our conference started out with students talking about what would they tell their grade 9 self. I'm the one with the glasses. I tell them myself, change my hair. What do you think? Chuck's the one with the nice haircut. Here's our conference agenda. We had a number of items where we did advocacy training with the youth, as well as training around 3 specific things: alcohol use, marijuana and tobacco, and prescription and over-the-counter drug use. And we looked at different campaigns that they could do within their schools. We also made the connection between drug use and mental health for the students so that they were able to make those leaps within their school programs as well. And then the most important part, and the piece we get the biggest bit of feedback about in all the campaigns we do and all the conferences we do, is the students said, we wish we had more planning time. So we actually had the public health nurse for each of the high schools attend, and they worked the last half hour with the students developing their campaign back at the school and making that connection with the youth so that when they got back to the school, they could fill out those applications for the different grants that they could get to support their campaigns. The outcomes, we've had over 40 student-led initiatives across Durham. We've had an increase in the grants. Chuck actually calls me now, or did call me now, and he would say, Dan, you need to help me select from the 14 versus the 3. So we're getting lots of people asking for the grants now. We're seeing an increased connectedness between liaison officers and resource officers in the school, and an increased connectedness between the schools and the public health officers. And we're actually seeing an impact in the schools, and I know Michelle's going to talk about that now.
How do I advance? Yes? Okay. Good afternoon. I'm Michelle Thomas. I'm a science teacher and guidance counselor at Sinclair Secondary School in Whitby. We have approximately 1,500 students at the moment. So I'll be sharing with you today some of the best practices over the last few years and some of the grants we've applied for and what we've done. So last October, I took 6 students to the DIDAC conference that Dan was talking about. Normally schools are allowed 4, but when I presented it to my grade 11 biology class, I did have even more interest. I had 6 really committed students who wanted to participate, so we were allowed to bring a little bit more. As Dan outlined, they attended the AM session on how to create an effective health promotion campaign. And then they had training from various community agencies on alcohol, marijuana, and tobacco, trends and use, and prescription drug abuse. So that's my group of students at the conference, at the board. So we ended up meeting weekly at lunch after the conference to put our heads together, and really I wanted this to be student-led. So I said, out of those 3 workshops, what was the issue you would like to work on in the school? And they actually chose alcohol use in teens. So they decided to focus on this, especially targeting grade 9s, because that tends to be an age where they may start experimenting with alcohol and binge drinking. The goal was to improve student well-being by making the students more aware about alcohol use and abuse and where they could seek help. Students plan to develop a 20 to 30-minute interactive workshop for grade 9 homeroom classes, and they wanted it to occur during the month of December. During December and June, there is a spike in first-time drinkers, and with the holiday season and alcohol all around, they felt that was a really good time to educate the students. They decided to partner with, the DIDAC group partnered with the Celtic Ambassadors, which was already established a few years back with our first police grant. We ended up launching this team with the help of our principal, Ken McNaughton. And what they do is they partner with grade 9 homerooms and do monthly workshops on bullying awareness, healthy relationships, mental health and well-being, also getting more students involved in extracurriculars at high school. So we felt since that was already in place, we would have our DIDAC students join with them and reach all 14 homerooms. So first we had a project proposal submitted to our principal, and she was very impressed with the idea the students had come up with. And then the students presented in November at a school community council meeting to inform the parent community and try out some of the interactive activities they wanted to use and gain feedback. So in this picture, we have our student council president, prime minister, wearing the fatal vision goggles and walking the line. And they passed some balls, throwing them back and forth to simulate impairment and how hard it is to do various tasks. So some of the other things they tried out was a plinko game and spinning wheel game that contained facts that the students in grade 9 could come up and test their knowledge on various topics relating to alcohol use and abuse, myth and fact cards, and we had support from our public health nurse. She provided some of these games, and we came up with the questions. And Dan also helped us with the party court mirror activity, where students had a simulated neighborhood, and using a mirror, they had to figure out how to get across the street from house to house. And of course, when you're looking in a mirror doing it, it's a lot more difficult. So the kids actually had fun with it, and it was a way to help them remember the stats on drinking. So in December, our workshop was performed to the homerooms the first week of December. The students started with a case study to really connect with the students and let them see the reality. It was about a girl who, in the US, who had had 15 shots of vodka in an hour, and she'd ended up collapsing and dying later that night. And then some facts were presented, local stats as well from Durham region about binge drinking. 25% of high school students were binge drinking at least once a month. And we also talked about how the brain is still developing until age 25. Students were provided with community resources and also recommended that they go see a guidance counselor if they felt they were struggling with alcohol abuse or had a parent or friend who was using too much. And also treatment facilities in the community were talked about. Then the interactive activity was performed to make the facts memorable. There was a question period, so students did have an opportunity to ask. We did have good feedback. One student said, because we did a survey, because it was our first time doing this, they said they would definitely remember the goggle activity. That was a favorite, and it was very informative and one of the best presentations they'd heard in 4 years on this topic. I think because it came from students, that made it really effective. So in the future, we would like to apply for more grants. Last spring, we spent our grant money on having the director's cut come in and film a social media awareness video with our students, things like Snapchat and Twitter and cell phone safety. So we're hoping to implement that in the spring. As well, have more school-wide assemblies and more money for resources. Community partnerships with police, public health nurse, and facilitators are very useful and enriching for our student leaders. And the most important factor in reducing high-risk behavior is for students to feel connected to the community. And I feel this was a good start for our group. If you have any questions, we can talk later. Thanks for listening.